What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, February 19th, 2020, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday. We have got a lot to talk about today. There's a lot going on here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and opinions. So let's get right on into it. Now, normally I don't go off and do sporting type situations, but it's worth mentioning that during the recent NASCAR race here, driver Ryan Newman was in serious condition, had this spectacular accident. I don't know if you've seen the video about it, but apparently while his injuries are serious, they are non-life-threatening. He's awake, he's talking to doctors, he's talking to his family, and so we wish him well, because car racing is fun. I don't know about NASCAR. You know, Jeff Dunham and his ventriloquist dummies are always saying, they're making a left turn. They're making another left turn. I'm going to go for a beer. Did I miss anything? No, they made more left turns. And I'm more of a Formula One fan myself. Anyway, getting into more serious stuff here. President Trump is on this whirlwind tour through the West, stumping for the general election in November. And apparently, a senior White House official is calling California occupied territory as Trump lands in Los Angeles. He's going to be out there, 4-day West Coast swing here. And this is coming from Joe Grogan, who's assistant to the president, director of Domestic Policy Council. And his comment about California being occupied territory drew a firestorm of criticism in a tweet Tuesday night about President Trump's trip to the Golden State. Well, I think the comment is somewhat legitimate. It's definitely occupied by the opposition party, liberal Democrats. And again, as Trump himself has pointed out, the place is a mess. There's needles all over the streets, especially in Pelosi's district. There's poo all over the streets and sidewalks. They can't get a handle on that one here. So Trump right now, apparently unconcerned about the political consequences, is handing out pardons, commutations, and apparently he's got a third option. And I forget the exact name for it, but basically can defer the imposition of a sentence. And of course, this has to do with Roger Stone, where Roger Stone was supposed to be sentenced today. I have not heard what the sentence is yet. But apparently the president could issue an order saying that the prosecutors are going to have to wait so many months, so many years before the punishment is actually inflicted here. But meanwhile, Trump has pardoned former New York City Police Commissioner Bernard Kerik. Of course, you know about Governor Rod Blagojevich got a commutation, rather. And President Trump pardoned Bernard Kerik and Michael Milken. Supposedly, the Milken pardon was at the behest of Sheldon Adelson. Now, Trump also pardoned the former 49ers owner, Eddie DeBartolo Jr., and did that at the White House. And immediately a whole bunch of lights of the NFL came on out and said what a great guy he was, and he shouldn't have been convicted of any crimes. So they're out there doing that. Okay, now Comey is attacking Attorney General Barr in a Washington Post op-ed saying justice is supposed to be blind. Bill Barr can't see that. And basically Comey feels threatened by Bill Barr. This is the second time he's attacked the Attorney General in 1 week. And that's exactly what's going on. The word is that Barr and the Department of Justice are starting to investigate some of the main players of the deep state, and they're running scared. So instead of like saying, you know, have mercy on us, we will plead guilty or nolo contendere, they're out there saying, no, get rid of the Attorney General. We'll want an Attorney General in there who won't prosecute us. Now, the media is out there saying that Barr is considering resigning over Trump's tweets A spokesperson for the Department of Justice is saying this is utter nonsense, this is more media fake news, and that Barr has no intention of resigning at this point. So we'll see what's going to happen on that. But, the corporate media, they're no longer reporting the news, they're trying to create it. They're putting it out there, he's going to resign, he's going to resign, he's going to resign, and they hope that everybody say, oh yeah, he's going to resign. And at some point, Barr will say, well, geez, everybody thinks I'm going to resign anyway, I might as well go ahead and do it. So tonight are the Democratic debates. Tulsi Gabbard did not make the cut, unfortunately, and Michael Bloomberg did, by virtue of a last-second change in the rules regarding the debate, probably, shall we say, eased along by that $300,000 donation to the Democratic National Committee that Bloomberg made. Pete Buttigieg is saying that millions of Americans possibly losing their private health insurance. He says he doesn't care. Bernie Sanders has been pushing for Medicare for all, which would bankrupt the nation, let's be honest, while other candidates have advocated a more moderate approach. And Pete Buttigieg let the mask slip on this issue during a campaign event this week. He doesn't care if you lose your private insurance. All right. Well, the primary race for the Democrats is looking like it's headed for a brokered convention. Many in the party have been increasingly desperate to determine which candidate to consolidate behind, particularly if that candidate isn't the currently front-running Senator Bernie Sanders, the most far left of the already strong left-leaning field. They don't want him in. They don't think a socialist candidate can defeat Donald Trump. I'll be very honest. I don't think there's anybody there in the Democratic lineup that can defeat Trump. And it's not because Trump is doing a really good job, except supposedly for the economy. But the Democrats haven't fielded a candidate we can really get behind. That's their problem. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Joe in Tennessee, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I think if anybody didn't see Blagojevic's press conference today or speech, they ought to watch it. It's on YouTube. It's about 20 minutes, and it really was something else. I mean, the guy still got it. I mean, as a politician and well-spoken, and it really seemed to have come from the heart. I think the guy definitely was persecuted, not prosecuted. I remember in 2008 when Blagojevich started telling Illinois not to do business with Bank of America. It wasn't very long after that that the henchman from the Department of Justice, Fitzgerald, who's one of Comey's best friends, went after him. And it was very similar to Roger Stone. It was a he said, she said thing over the telephone about supposedly, selling a Senate seat. But we all know it was a big farce and a fraud. Rahm Emanuel and Obama and Bank of America, they had to get rid of Blagojevich. He wasn't one of the good old boys. I think that he's all, it just seems like him and Traficant, all these politicians that go off the reservation, boy, they really throw the book at them. Yet all these other corrupt guys like Comey and McCabe, they just seem to skate on by and laugh at us. I remember Jim Traficant when he got put in prison because of the lesbian Janet Reno. Same thing. They threw away the key. He got, trumped up charges. Somebody worked on his house, said it was a campaign finance fraud. Like all these guys don't, Biden and them don't do that on a daily basis for billions. And Traficant from Youngstown, he was the same way. He was a populist Democrat, and he went against the foreclosures, and he really pissed off the powers that be when he was sheriff, because he refused to go foreclose on houses for the banks. So it seems like the banks, there's always like a bank angle to when they railroad these politicians, And I've always kind of liked Blagojevich, or I can't even pronounce his name, but he just
Blagojevich.
Blagojevich, yeah, that's it. But and another thing I would like to comment on is like a lot of these politicians that end up getting the book thrown at them. They're Italians or they're ethnics or they're bohunks, we call them, or But it doesn't seem like you see very many Jewish politicians ever going to prison. It just seems kind of odd to me. It's like we have a kosher justice department. That they don't raid the Jewish guys in the middle of the night. Stone, he's Italian and I think Hungarian. Manafort's Italian. it just seems like there's a separate set of rules in this country. I hate to cause it, but I see a pattern here. Like if you're, they don't seem to throw the book at the Jewish people, is what I'm saying. But it just seems that maybe there's some examples people can bring up that Scooter Libby, I guess, could be considered that, but I don't think he ever went to prison. And I just think that then I hear about this guy Barr telling Trump that he's going to resign if he keeps tweeting. First of all, I don't think that's a true story, because if it is, it isn't. Yeah, because I know Trump, and Trump's a leader, and I've been in leadership positions. I've been chief engineer, and a few times I've had guys like threaten to quit, and I just tell them to get off. I just say, that's it, bye. Because you can't have that like against your authority if you want to be a real leader. If you want to, these guys, they come on there, they're young, they think that they're indispensable, and they pull that, well, if you make me do that, I'm going to quit. And I always give them one. That's what I call it. That's like, but the second time they do it, I said, pack your bags and get off, and that's what leaders do. And I think that's what tells me this is a manufactured scandal, because they're trying to manufacture as many scandals about Barr and Trump and the Justice Department as they can, because they know what's coming down the pike, and what's coming down the pike is going to be a lot of perp walks. I think Trump and Barr are going to act. And the reason I say that is not because I really trust the establishment guy like Barr is. I just watch the reaction of the other side and how panicked they are, and that usually is a good indicator that something big's about to happen. I mean, they're like you said, they're pulling this one about Barr threatening to resign. I think the Washington Post just pulled that right out of their you-know-what. I don't believe it. And if it is true, I would think
it originated with Drudge. Drudge was the one who said that his sources were saying Barr was considering resigning.
Yeah, I don't know about Drudge. And actually, I wanted to say something about Drudge and Michael Savage. The second time today, I heard comments about Bernie's heart was today. And I just worry about that. When I see the pre-propaganda starting to, it's like they're pre-programming us. That's what they usually do. They soften you up. So when he does have a heart attack, nobody's surprised. And I heard Michael Savage talk about it yesterday on his show. I listened on podcast. And then I see Drudge has a lead story about Bloomberg and Bernie's heart. And it's like you said, they're going to do everything possible to not allow Sanders to win. I mean, he should win. It should be a cakewalk for him. And I really do. I wouldn't doubt he has a heart attack or a stroke, because these people are very dangerous. I mean, I've been surprised they haven't gone after Trump, and they probably have, but he's successfully eluded them. But if I was Bernie Sanders, I'd have a good cardiologist like following me around, because they have like weapons they can use and microwaves and heart attack guns. And I just see the pre-planning. It's like these people telegraph their moves. They project the propaganda to kind of soften you up before they do something. So I'm a little bit worried. Like I said, it just seems like here we got Drudge talking about his heart, Savage talking about his heart. Where did all this come from, I mean, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, everybody's worried about Bernie's heart, just kind of alarming to me. So,
it does look like they're telegraphing that, and yeah, you're right. There are ways they can simulate a heart attack on somebody and take them out.
And I do think that to the establishment Democrats, who are the real powers, the Hillarys and all them, they're not going to let Bernie Sanders be the nominee. I just don't believe it. I don't believe they're going to allow that to happen. I expect election fraud and Super Tuesday. They're going to rally around somebody, either Bloomberg or Buttigieg, but at the same time they could pull Bernie could get sick, and it wouldn't surprise me. It seems like they're preparing people for that. But once again, I really think people should, if you get a chance to watch this speech by I can't pronounce his name, but Blagojevich, yeah, because it was really heartfelt. It was great. It was a really good speech. I mean, with his family and being in prison, and it was actually kind of it was very uplifting for a guy that just got out of prison, And it really is when you think about why him. You know, I always thought like, why are they really threw the book at him? And the only thing I can think of was when he went after Bank of America, and that was right during the financial crisis. You know, so I guess they have to make an example out of people, just like they did James Traficant, who I believe they murdered on top of put in prison. But that's just, you know, they said he got in a tractor accident. I don't buy that. But, he was a great man.
Yeah, I was very suspicious of that story as well. Don't forget, Traficant was also an enemy of the Federal Reserve, which is like signing your own death warrant. And, you know, he was the one who got up in Congress and said, we're in a state of bankruptcy.
Yeah, well, you got to be careful with the Federal Reserve. You know, they got... they have all. I went to a federal and the Fed protest in Jacksonville once, and they were guys up on the roof with sniper rifles pointed at us, and we're just a ragtag bunch. But they literally, then they had them pointed. I don't like people pointing guns at me, and I always said that. I said, we're not armed. Why are they? I mean, literally, they were sighting us in. And you know, that first rule of guns is you don't point at anybody unless you plan on shooting them. You know. Yes. And I thought, what a lack of professionalism, but I think they were doing it to intimidate us, you know?
Yes.
And it didn't work, because I don't fall for that. I don't, you know, that's just, you know, you don't intimidate me, you know? It just gets me more pissed off. But I just thought it was very bad manners. And, but at the same time, it showed you what kind of power they have, you know? And they had their own goon squads up there on the roof. And like, we're just a collection of misfits down there, but at the same time, you know, that was back in 2008, and I guess they felt like, you know, you never know, they were kind of losing control. I always thought the best thing to do with the Federal Reserve is go there and go to the building and have an exorcism, and just see what happens. I really do. I think that would scare the hell out of them. You go there with holy water and chase the demons out of there. I bet you would get shot if you tried doing that. So. Anyway, that was kind of something I was trying to organize, was like an exorcism of the Federal Reserve. And but I have a feeling that would really get you in a lot of trouble.
Well, I imagine so. And yeah, I mean, the Federal Reserve is a scam. It basically threw us back into the same kind of financial slavery that triggered the American Revolution. And it's been so cleverly marketed and propagandized to the American people. They don't realize what a scam it is, because the Federal Reserve is just creating money out of thin air, and they're doing it now in huge amounts, trying to keep the economy propped up. And then they loan that funny money out at interest. And if you know, go ahead. Well, I
was going to say, I remember my dad saying that he kind of liked the Federal Reserve, and the reason he liked the Federal Reserve is because he saw the political class as so incompetent, you know, like back during the 70s with Carter and all that, that he thought, and then you had that guy Volcker come in there and kind of actually did straighten out the inflation. So I think that that's part of the issue, is why some people do support the Federal Reserve, is because they look at, you know, AOC and Maxine Waters and people like that, and their attitude is like, well, do you want them running your money supply? And I can see that, but I think we need to have a money supply based on like gold, or like you believe the the electro, something like that. That's tangible and not, and you know, you can't manipulate it, and that makes it for everybody. You know, like the political class can't corrupt it, and that's the beauty of that. You know, having a tangible asset back in your currency.
Now, incompetence aside, the main difference between government control of the currency and bankers' control of the currency is the government, at least in theory, is managing the currency for the benefit of the entire nation, whereas the bankers are managing the currency to make themselves more money.
No, but you know, once again, the politicians are in the pocket of the bankers as it is.
Oh, yeah, they're very generous come campaign season. All right, listen, I'm going to put you on hold. We got to take a break for commercials. Don't hang up. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And a reminder that Republic Broadcasting Network is in the middle of a fundraising drive. And folks, the situation is dire, to say the least, and they really need your help. And first of all, I want to express our gratitude to those of you who have already donated to Republic Broadcasting. And for those of you who have not but would like to, the postal address to send a check money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit card or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 3. The network thanks you. Okay, we're talking with Joe in Tennessee, and Joe, you were about to finish up your call with. Go ahead.
Well, you mentioned Daytona, and I wanted to tell you how we used to every year we'd go to the Daytona 500 and the one, I guess it was the 400 in the summer, and give out 9/11 DVDs, and it was a pretty hostile crowd. But towards the end, like after about the 5th or 6th year, they weren't as hostile as they were when we first started doing it, because that was, the Gulf War was going on and all that. It was Veterans for Peace, and I'd probably give out 2,000 or 3,000 DVDs each one of the races. And one year, it was the year they had the pothole, and a guy gave us free tickets. I don't know if they were trying to get us away, but we went and watched, and it's really amazing how fast and how much power those cars have, and how close they drive. I mean, literally, they're like 2 feet away from each other, and they're going 200 miles an hour just about. And you could, like, even though you might be a couple hundred feet away from the track, it just your whole chest vibrates when they go by you. It's pretty amazing, But
it really is not bad for a bunch of bootleggers, huh?
Yeah, well, that's how they got their start, right?
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
It's pretty impressive. I don't know, like I said, I'm not much for crowds and lines and waiting around, but I was glad I experienced it. And it is something the TV, when you watch it on television, you really don't get quite the feel for how fast they're going or how close they are or the power. Like, it's just amazing. You can just feel. Sometimes you go up to the fence and you kind of get as close as you can, and it's just an amazing, like, feeling to have them go zoom right by you, and you just feel it all through your bones, It's incredible. It really is incredible. And watching that guy, Newman, do the flip and get hit, and
yes.
It's amazing that he's going to be okay. I mean, he's in the hospital and everything, but, 10 years ago, forget it. He would have been,
yeah.
He would.
The cars are a lot safer these days. They really are.
And he got, like, T-boned up in the air, upside down. I mean, I know the cars are safer, and I figured something like what happened to Dale Earnhardt's never going to happen again. But when he's up in the air and he gets hit upside down, I don't know how they can design a car to keep you safe even when something like that happens. But they did. I mean, it's quite amazing, the technology. It really is something.
Well, I'm glad he's still okay here. Do you know why they drive so close to each other?
I guess it's drafting, right? It creates a vacuum or something?
That's right. It's drafting. And the car that's behind, he gets up really close and he gets into that vortex from the car in front of him. He can back off on the gas. And if you do that enough, you can skip a pit stop. And that means that's quite a significant saving in time around that track.
Yeah, I think they also, like, they team up with one another, like the Ford car, the different racing groups, and they, like, slingshot each other somehow or another. I don't know enough about it, but it's pretty amazing. I guess they use airflow and suction and all that stuff that gets created by just the speed, and it's pretty inventive stuff, So it really is technologically, it's pretty impressive. People think it's like you said,
really
it's just a bunch of hillbillies.
Boy, that's down there on the par with Bloomberg's comment about farmers here. It's really there's a lot of science that goes into those cars here. Interestingly enough, both my parents were race drivers, hill climb, road rally, that kind of thing. Although my father actually did one time drive a Formula 3 car, and they were really good at it. They won a bunch of awards, and then one of their really close friends got killed in a crash. And at that point, they said, we're parents, we have kids, and we can't do this anymore. And they sort of hung up their racing regalia at that point. But I remember when my mother passed away and we cleaned out her house, there were like boxes and boxes of plaques and trophies and everything that we had to deal with. Anyway, Joe, thank you for that phone call.
All
We're
right.
going to let you
All right,
go.
thank
We're
you.
coming up
Bye.
on another commercial break here. Okay, Barack Obama is continuing to get a lot of flack for his comments of trying to take credit for the economy. And what's interesting, Obama himself admitted that the $787 billion stimulus that he signed was an utter failure. There were no shovel-ready jobs, and yet he's still out there trying to take credit for Trump's economy and ignores the fact that the year after signing the stimulus, more than 4 million jobs were lost. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones to Paul in New Jersey. Aloha, Paul. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Michael, back in about 7 years ago, Paul Topetti he's got a rock group. He's a good guy.
Yes.
He used to come on I think Rick Adams' show a lot.
We've
Anyway,
had him on this show too.
Yeah, he's a really good nationalist, good fella. Anyway, he would put on over in Pennsylvania what they would call Freedom Palooza, which was a rock festival with bands and good nationalists and patriots there. And for about 3 years, Jim Traficant would show up. And so I would go at least for, it would be a 3-day festival. I would generally only go for 1 day. And I'd always bring $100 bill with me. And it gave me great joy because I'd get Mr. Traficant alone, right? And then I'd shake his hand and slip him the $100 bill. And he was always grateful because, the guy's driving all the way from Ohio out to Pennsylvania. He might need a hotel room, restaurants, gas expenses.
Yeah.
So, but he was always a friendly, jovial guy. So I always liked to see him, and he learned to remember my name. And it was funny. And here's another story. When he was in prison, back around, I'd say circa 2008, I wrote him a letter. And, just, empathizing with him and saying how bad I felt. And, I think it was wrong that he was in prison. And, a few months later, I got a little letter back from, and then the heading on the letter said, from the federal prison in Terre Haute or wherever he was held. I have the letter. And more important, I have what he wrote. And he basically wrote on a little piece of paper. And it said, the reason I'm in prison is because of the Jews in the Justice Department. And I still have that note he sent me. So for anybody who wants to know what Jim Traficant thought, or as to the reason why he was in prison, I have a little historical memento from Mr. Traficant that says he pinned it on the Jews going after him, the Jews in the Justice Department. So I thought I'd like to share that with you.
Well, that sounds like a museum piece to me.
And you know what? Maybe I'll, if you put out your address or slip me your address, maybe I'll run off a copy and send you a copy.
That would be lovely. The address is at the website under the donate page.
Okay. So I'll do that. Okay?
All right. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yep. Okay. But I just like to say he was a great man, always jovial, a good American, good nationalist, and a brave man in the sense that he was willing to take on the Israeli lobby, who really is a burden to this country and is really steering America down the wrong path. So he's a great
agree
American.
with you. Yes, he was. Yeah, absolutely was.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call here. I just got an interesting email, and this is about Buttigieg. And it says, I heard you say that a gay POTUS wouldn't be a big deal for you. I think you should rethink that. As POTUS, you'll have to deal with and talk to people from all over the world from different cultures. Many of these cultures don't accept gay people. How is a married gay POTUS going to deal with these cultures and leaders that reject gay people? Plus, the country would be the butt of many gay jokes around the world. Personally, I don't want a gay for POTUS because they represent less than 5% of the population. Okay, it is a valid point. I don't like some of the language that's in the email. But it is a valid point. On the other hand, in the level of diplomacy, I think probably diplomats from foreign countries would conceal their personal feelings about homosexuality when conducting business with the president. In any case, it doesn't look like we're going to have to deal with that problem anyway, because Buttigieg is way down in the polls here. Sanders is way ahead, and barring the unforeseen, it looks like Sanders is going to be the Democratic nominee. But of course, it's a long way between here and November, and anything could happen. I think Super Tuesday is really what's going to show us what's going to happen on that. Anyway, speaking of Bernie Sanders, Sanders is comparing voting for him to voting for Nelson Mandela. That, I think, was a little bit over the line, but he was basically talking about civil rights and people marching to the polls. He says, we're fighting to change America, and it's going to take you getting out there and voting, which that part, obviously, I'm going to agree with. All right, there's been another incident over in Colorado. There was a white guy accusing a black guy of wearing a racist t-shirt that said Black Guns Matter, and a brawl broke out between these two, and then a bunch of the so-called Bernie brothers joined in. I don't think the Bernie brothers have anything to do with the Bernie Sanders campaign. I think it's a put-up job to try and make it look like Bernie Sanders is encouraging violence or supporting violence. I don't think they're really part of his campaign. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I was just recalling the Barack Obama election and the Rod Blagojevich affair. And I know that you remember this because I remember we talked about it back then, and how restricted the trial was with Blagojevich and some other things, some things that came out in that. When he was both Obama and Rahm Emanuel were selling their Senate and congressional seat, basically.
Yes.
It's kind of a tried and true thing. It wasn't unique to them, but they were definitely selling it. And they had the trial itself was restricted. They weren't allowed to go anywhere near that. But there had been calls that Obama's office had made and offers. And among one of the things that strikes me that I remember was they were talking about one of the people that they had approached to buy, who had approached Obama to buy the Senate seat. And of course, Blagojevich was the guy that had to sell it because he was going to make the appointment, was Jesse Jackson Jr. And Jesse Jackson Jr. made an offer to buy the Senate seat, the appointment, and somehow the feds got onto it somehow. And when they came out in the papers, Jesse Jackson Jr.'s defense was, well, I couldn't have done this. I'm an FBI informant. Do you remember that?
I remember that, which suggests that maybe Jesse Jackson Jr. was put up to doing this.
He was a sitting Jesse Jackson Jr. congressman out of Chicago, and admitted that even back then he was an FBI and informant as a sitting congressman. Now you talk about the deep state, and by the way, they totally restricted that trial, so they couldn't talk about any of that stuff. So at any rate, I thought that was. I remember we talked about it. You and I talked about it on the air about. I mean, what does that say when the FBI is suborning sitting U.S. congressmen? And by the way, he went to jail finally, Jesse Jackson Jr. Not there was any great loss. The guy was an idiot, just like his father. But great book, by the way, written about Jesse Jackson called Shakedown. If you ever get a chance to read that.
I've heard about it. I haven't read it, though. But, yeah, Jackson was a master at that. And, of course, following the assassination of Martin Luther King, Jackson sort of arrogated to himself the leadership role for the black movement and basically tamed it and toned it down. And a lot of people think that he himself was also compromised by the FBI.
Can I tell a quick story about
Sure.
that group? This is I can't say names, okay, because I'll get sued. But back in the 90s, I was an HR director and came up with we were rebuilding South Central LA. The company that I worked for had stores burned out. Had to put in like 8 stores, replace a couple, and since the real estate prices were down, we're actually going to expand. So at any rate, we're going all around and getting people's permission to buying political support for this big move. So the local councilmen and people like that, and I came up with an idea that took a black organization and got a bunch of people trained, and we would pay a fee for training these people because it's hard to staff in South Central LA, and they need to be skilled people, skilled workers, and they would get $5,000 for everybody who completed this course with this particular black group. At any rate, so at the same time this is going on, so they made me. I got put on this the advisory board of this organization in the Los Angeles iteration of this organization. I was glad to do it. I was glad I had something to do with getting all these inner city kids hired, and it actually saved the organization the fees that we paid to get these kids trained. But at any rate, at the time, I met and was sitting on this board, and that was the time when the old what's the name, the Denny's lawsuit came out.
Yes.
And where Denny's was being sued big time, and there was a horrible boycott with Jesse Jackson and all these guys, pitching in and going after Denny's. And by the way, in the hierarchy of sit down restaurants, Denny's is about the lowest, right?
Yes.
It would be a little better if you went to, you can go up the chain to things that are better, and they have better managers and better waitresses. So to sit and not be waited on for 45 minutes or getting the order wrong, that's not necessarily racism. It's just because Denny's gets the worst of all the restaurant employees. But at any rate, Denny's had like 500 stores or something along those lines. They were all corporate owned, and they cut a deal with all these organizations, among which was Jesse Jackson's and the one that I'm talking about, but I can't say, and where they were going to pull off the boycott, pull off the lawsuit, and bring off all the heat of Denny's. The Denny's was going to take about 10% of their stores, like 50 or 60 stores, and make them franchise stores. They were going to award them as minority franchise stores. And a McDonald's, if you own a Denny's, it's probably $1 million a year anyway.
Yeah.
Right. At any rate, I can tell you for a fact that the head of the organization I was with, his son got one of those franchises, and I was told. I know that for a fact. I was told that Jackson and some of those guys, they got their franchises as well. And thus, after that, I read with great interest the book Shakedown, which then, categorized cataloged a whole bunch of other instances where they will, all these black social justice warriors and all that would have these things, and then we're just waiting for the payoff. They were just waiting with their hands out to get for the payoff to make them go away.
Yes.
At any rate, that's my story. But that's an absolutely true story, and it's a fact that the head of one of these guys, and I don't want to get sued, but his son got it. Was making $1 million or $2 million a year just off the franchise that he got. So there you go.
All right. Well, it is an interesting story, and I've heard of the book Shakedown. I haven't actually read it, but yeah, basically there was a lot of that going on. And the idea was that unless you donated a lot of money to Jesse Jackson's outfit, he would organize boycotts against your business. And American businesses were so afraid of him that they would go along with that. Say, oh yes, we're making a huge donation, and of course it was tax deductible. But yeah, that's exactly what was going on.
And by the way, here's to bring another one: the Clinton Justice, Bill Clinton Justice Department, and Bill Clinton administration. Remember the lawsuit, the big lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court by Microsoft, where they were going to go after Microsoft in the back in the 90s or whatever, and a big federal lawsuit. The feds went after Microsoft, and I know the lawyer that handled that case. Actually, he's handled more Supreme Court cases than anybody in the history of the United States. Went to my high school. At any rate, what it boiled down to was Microsoft didn't make enough contributions to the Democrats. Apparently, they made them to the Republicans. They didn't make them to the Democrats, and so they got singled out. And then there's that whole thing with the guitar company. You remember that?
Oh, I remember that one. The wood problem.
Yes, yeah. I mean, so Microsoft learned their lesson, and they started making donations to both sides of the aisles just to make sure. And then, and I'm sure you can tell the guitar story because I know that from you. But that's just the way it works, Mike. The whole government is shakedown, and there are little subchapters like the black groups and the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. But the whole place is it's all shakedown.
Yeah. So, no, we have a government that behaves like an organized crime gang.
Yeah, I mean, it really has got to go. It really has got to go. But good luck with that. It ain't gonna. I don't think it's going to happen unless we do the old Dracula's Castle thing with pitchforks and torches and go after Dracula's Castle. It will never change from the inside. Don't forget
tar and feathers. Yeah, no, it's never going to change from the inside. I still hold out that it's tearing itself apart, and I'm opposed to violence. I don't want to see a revolution in the streets of America because the wrong people get killed with that. Anyway, listen, Peter, we're coming up on another commercial break here. We're going to have to let you go, and we'll be back after these few words with more news. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Terry in California. Aloha, Terry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Kudos to Joe for passing out those CDs at the Daytona 500 on 9/11. I think if we all got active like that, we could make a difference. So
I agree.
Congratulations to him. And the next caller was talking about Jim Trafficant. And I remember after Jim Trafficant got out of jail, he was talking, and this is probably one of the things that he said that got him underneath the tractor, was the fact that this figure of $3 billion a year going to Israel is way off the mark. It's more like $15 billion when you get to all the hidden programs inside of all the bills that were passed and all this sort of thing. It comes out to more like $15 billion than it is to $3. And of course now it's 3.8 thanks to Obama. A lot of people don't realize that Israel bombs just about on a daily basis. They run airstrikes over to Syria,
yes,
and they also hit Gaza, on a regular basis, which of course never makes the news. And one day they hit 3 countries, 3 violations of international law: Syria, Iraq, and Gaza. And of course, they've run other airstrikes to places in Africa and all that sort of thing. And of course, Iran has never done that. They never attacked anybody around the area. Allow me to disagree with you on one point. You were talking about when the whole thing comes down, how are we going to rebuild our country? And you started talking about different articles and amendments to the Constitution and we should keep and all that sort of thing. Well, I think the communists, the global communists, are waiting for that. They got a plan for that. And as soon as it comes down, they have a plan to come in and just take over. You know, I don't know what your thoughts are on my possibility of that happening. Do you have any thoughts on that, Mike?
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I mean, when the U.S. government collapsed, we're going to see a replay of what happened in the Soviet Union when they collapsed, and that's going to be all these carpetbaggers and everybody coming on in and try and take advantage of the situation. And we, the people, are going to have to just be aware of that and not allow it to happen. And first and foremost on my list of things that we're not going to allow happen is we're not going to allow the establishment of another private central bank. And anybody who suggests that, we're going to have them tarred, feathered, hanged, drawn, quartered, burned at the stake, and then the ashes peed on by a rabid moose.
Yeah. Well, the situation is a little bit different in that the communists fell over there when the Soviet Union came down. Over here, the communists are not in, but they're waiting for an opportunity to come in and take over. So I think maybe they have a better chance of doing it here than they would back then because they fell. You know, they didn't have any power left over there then. But anyway, just one last question. Yesterday,
actually, can you stay on the line? Terry, can you stay on the line? We got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we were talking with Terry in Canada, and you had a question you wanted to ask me.
Yeah, Mike, I'm going to ask a question and hang up, and you can give an answer. You were talking about Long Valley, that volcano underground that was really hot somewhere. You said the United States, but you didn't say where. Do you have any idea where that is?
Could you run that by me one more time, please?
That Long Valley area that had Yellowstone's got that volcano underground, but it's a big area, you know, like a lot bigger than a volcano, you know.
Well, it's a super volcano, the Long Valley caldera, and it's classed as a super volcano, and it's something like 240 cubic miles of magma, and they're thinking that as much as a quarter of it is in the right condition to be a liquid, which means it could be squirted up to the surface.
Right. Do you know where that is?
Long Valley, California.
Oh, it's California. Okay.
Yes.
I'll check that out. Okay, thank you, Mike.
All right, you've got it, and we're going to switch over to Al in Canada. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. When you were talking to Peter, he mentioned that guitar company.
Yeah.
With the seizure of wood and whatnot. That was Gibson.
Yes.
And that was around 2008, I think. So what they did was there was this thing called the Lacey Act, which had to do with endangered species, and it was amended in 2008 to include plants. So for some reason, they got it in their head to go to Gibson because they had some kind of idea that they were down in Madagascar trying to illegally obtain ebony wood. It's a dark black, almost a blackish wood for fretboards, and you can use it for other things as well. But the whole thing is, and it was retroactive too, that law. So that's very important to understand. So let's just say you sold somebody a piano in 2005, and it was sold into Canada, and it had ivory on the keys. They could go after you, right? That's how silly that is. It's retroactive.
That is actually not supposed to happen because there's a prohibition against ex post facto laws in this country, which obviously in the case of Gibson was not adhered to. What made the Gibson case pop into the public eye was that there was another rival guitar company that was also importing these exotic woods that was left alone. And I think it came down to that guitar company had made a donation to some political group or political candidate, and Gibson had refused.
That could be Martin.
Could be. I don't know for a fact.
It also could be Paul Reed Smith. Like these high-end guitar companies, right?
Yes.
It all comes down to the same thing: dirty politics.
Absolutely, like that other caller said, it's all one shakedown after another.
Oh yes, definitely. There is no justice. It's just them. So, even up here in Canada, we have this incompetent SOB that's actually like in talks with natives to try and stop these illegal shutdowns of the rail system. So I'm wondering, and I'm actually wondering now, is this all manufactured because the economy's going for a dump? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But regardless, if I were the prime minister of this country, I would say to these native people, listen, if you want this cash that we give you every month, like clockwork, stop this, because you will not cripple this country. And that's it. I mean, like, this sort of thing has to stop. And it doesn't matter where it comes from. It has to stop. The people of any country should not be held over. Like where do they get the balls big enough to even do these sorts of things? They obviously think that the people in countries are so complacent and so brainwashed that will allow them to do these sorts of things. And I guess it's working up until now, Mike. But at some point it has to stop. Otherwise, we're slaves. I mean, we are to a certain extent, but we're bought and paid for slaves.
Yes, we are. We are. We're enslaved by debt. Yeah, it is. It really is shameful. And it's amazing how everybody keeps talking about freedom and how we're a free people. And, even in that series premiere for HBO's The Newsroom, they're out there saying, what makes America the greatest nation on earth? And one of the people on the stage goes, it's freedom, freedom, and freedom, and let's keep it that way. We've lost our freedom. I mean, the Bill of Rights is under constant attack. And it really is kind of a sorry situation. Yeah, nobody seems to care. We're all convinced we're free because that's what we're being told. You remember when George W. Bush was saying that the World Trade Towers got knocked down by people who hate us for our freedoms. Nobody hates freedom except the rulers. Ordinary people, they love freedom. Everybody, all the world over, people want to be free. With that old song.
Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. But yes, some people still believe it, and they're indoctrinating children to believe this sort of nonsense, and it just keeps perpetuating itself. There are little glimmers of hope. There was a lawsuit that peach farmer won against Bayer and BASF. He was awarded, what was it, $260 million, Mike?
Yeah, in punitive damages.
Yeah, and of course, we know that'll get chipped away and all that, over the next few years, but still, I mean, that sort of thing has to keep happening, and there are a lot of, a lot of lawsuits pending, especially against Bayer, Monsanto, and in the end, these are the types of people that pay off the politicians to either look the other way or, go after somebody else, go after the competition. It's so blatant now. I mean, it's painful. It's just painful. Bernie Sanders, he is up there, Mike.
Yes.
He's, what, 77?
You mean in terms of his age? Yes, he's definitely up there.
Yeah, he should not even be running. I appreciate your time, Mike. I got to go. I got a package at the door. Take it easy.
All right. Well, got to go take care of those packages there. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to James in South Carolina. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I'd like for you to have guests on that will explain how the economy keeps going. I think about this all the time. How can we maintain all that's going on? Do you have any idea how it keeps going? They always said if they keep printing money, that it would eventually, end up in huge inflation, and that hasn't really happened. it just keeps going on. It reminds me of a Samuel Beckett play or something. It goes on and on and on. You got any idea?
Well, I think, if you look at the devaluation of the dollar since the creation of the Federal Reserve, you'll realize that the economy is, in fact, in serious trouble. And, we're all waiting for it to collapse. But what's going to happen is all of this instant money creation is going to devalue the dollar so much that ultimately, and it's already started happening, other countries don't want to use the dollar anymore. Back when I was still doing my animation work in Hawaii, we'd get cost estimates from providers, and they'd say, this estimate is only good for 30 days. And after 30 days, we'd have to re-estimate based on the decline of the dollar. So
how long
I don't
ago
think
was that you were doing that?
About 2 years, maybe 3 years.
Well,
and
but it keeps on. It just keeps on and on. My understanding is that the dollar now is only worth about 2 cents of what it was in 1913. Well,
yeah, that's about right.
But it keeps going. I mean, for all I know, they can continue this till it gets down to be a half a cent, and everybody will still be going out and eating. And I don't understand. I hope it doesn't crash, but I don't understand why it doesn't. If they can do this for as long as they've done it, they can probably do it a lot longer. I mean, am I not correct?
They can't. Yeah, but they can't do it forever. They can't.
Well, they might not can do it forever, but a lot of people were told, in 2008 and all like that, they had to go out and buy silver and all like that. They would have been better off if they'd have bought stocks.
Well, ordinary working people can't afford to buy stocks anymore. You'd have to work something like 100 hours to buy a single share of the S&P 500.
Well, but what I'm saying is that all of the predictions that have been made have not been valid, and this thing just keeps going on. I would like it might have something to do with the dollar. Maybe we got guns to the heads of all the other countries and all like that, and we're forcing them to use the dollar. I don't know. I'd like to know. I'd like for you to have people on that might be knowledgeable, that might give us some information, if that's possible. If anybody knows, I'm not sure they do.
Well, here's the problem. First of all, you're absolutely right about the United States not necessarily holding a gun, but there's definitely a lot of arm twisting to get these countries to keep on using the dollar, to basically get monopolistic control over key resources like oil, so that these other countries will have to basically go along with whatever the U.S. says. But, ultimately, we're already seeing the United States exerting force on other countries to try and keep things going the way they're going on. But ultimately, the reason prognostication is so difficult is because they do have the printing presses. They can just go on making money out of thin air. We know it can't last forever, but guessing when it's going to come crashing down is very, very difficult because they keep changing the rules.
Well, they change it around all the time, and I don't see how you can know what's going on. There's something I've wondered about. I mean, they can crash. They used to say anyway that they were going to crash the economy. Okay, they can apparently crash it any time they want to. It must be to their advantage that they don't do it. It must be some advantage that they just keep it going. Well,
nobody is trying to deliberately crash the economy. The problem is they can't stop it.
Well, I have wondered, and this is something else that I wondered about. They talk about the technology that's being hidden. I don't know that that's true, but I kind of think it is. That maybe they have technologies that would just obviate the debt. Would make maybe they have 0-point energy or something. I don't know, and they could unleash these things and make the debt nothing. We wouldn't have to use money anymore.
Well,
you think that's possible?
Well, no, we need a medium of exchange, but the Federal Reserve note borrowed at interest from the Federal Reserve is not the way to go. It's basically the banking system we fought the revolution to escape from. And what we need is a commodity-based currency that is issued by the government and then taxed back without interest in order to prosper the nation again. Um,
Well,
so,
I'd be in favor of that, but people, it's been going like it's been going for 100 years, and we're lost 98 cents on the dollar, and I think we're going to keep on going. But like I say, if you could have people on sometime that would talk about
right.
this, I'd just appreciate. Oh, you had a good show, Mike. I appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And back to the phones to Don in Arizona. And Don, I understand you also want to talk about the Gibson Guitar Company.
I know a little bit about it, Mike. I think it was at the time that they went bankrupt, it was Brazilian rosewood was getting kind of rare, and that was considered a really good tone wood for the back and the sides of an acoustic guitar. And it wasn't, but the guy said it might have been Martin. I think it was some Chinese companies. They seemingly had in the supply of this Brazilian rosewood, even though it was an endangered species, and they were making knockoffs. Basically, most of these acoustic guitars are Martin copies, and they were selling them. I never did get one, but I was told you could get a Chinese acoustic guitar with this Brazilian rosewood, and I think that they got away with it in China, but the Gibson couldn't get away with it in America. So I think that's kind of what it was. That's what I gathered anyway. But as far as this other guy here talking about, nobody can predict the future for sure, but every time in history there's been a fiat money system, it has collapsed. Every time it has been tried a few times. So,
yeah, well, we know it's going to collapse. We just don't know when.
Yeah, we can't predict the future. Exactly right. He's right about that. But and it's possible that America could blow up. Technically, we could blow up every other country, and then we'd be the only country here, and I guess our money would be okay then. And I don't know. Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. We're pretty sure. Like today, all the precious metals are going up like crazy today. So, wish I would have bought some rhodium a while back. Rhodium's up to 10,800
Wow.
an ounce. Okay, I'll see you later, Mike. Thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are now empty. 800-313-9443. Getting on back to the news here. Trump is accusing Bloomberg of engaging in illegal campaign activities and says that basically all of Bloomberg's money that he's poured into his campaign, it's his own money, but he's poured it into his campaign, and Trump is saying that this is nothing less than a large-scale illegal campaign contribution, because the limits to campaign contributions have to apply to everybody. There is no exemption saying a candidate can pour millions of dollars into his own campaign. And so Trump is absolutely right. Bloomberg is already guilty of illegal campaign contributions by contributing that much money to himself. And Trump tweeted he's spreading money all over the place, only to have recipients of his cash payments, many former opponents, happily joining or supporting his campaign. Isn't that called a payoff? Well, enough money, you'll get people to change their political views here. I'm not saying that I would never sell out, but they're going to have to offer more than 57 cents for me to do that. All righty, out in Hollywood, the executives there are secretly supporting Bloomberg. They're afraid of Bernie Sanders. They're afraid he's going to clinch the nomination and plunge the Democrats into disarray. So Hollywood executives have expressed joy over the rise of former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Now, Michael Bloomberg, I mean, all of this stuff from his past is coming on up, and it's making it look like he's not a very nice man. And apparently at one time he blamed banks making loans to Black Americans as the cause of the 2008 financial crisis. Well, he shouldn't have phrased it that way. The reason we had the 2008 financial crisis was the subprime mortgages, which went to people who previously wouldn't have qualified for a mortgage. And yes, many of them were Black, but there were a lot of white people, everybody was in that pool of people who were struggling to get by, and they got lured into these mortgages by these teaser rates on these variable rate mortgages. And then, of course, the rates went up, they got trapped, they lost their homes, and the whole thing fell behind. Now, apparently back in 2017, Mike Bloomberg was on The View, and he was in a segment that he now wants erased from the internet, because in that interview, he said, everybody's got to get behind Trump. Trump had won the election. He was getting ready to take office. And Bloomberg said, yeah, you got to get behind him. And now he wants that to go away. Amy Klobuchar is out there trying to recover from having forgotten the name of Mexico's president. She's saying, I was too tired. This is not a game of jeopardy. If running for president of the United States were indeed a game of jeopardy, then the Mexican president's name would be filed under world leaders for $100. And according to Senator Amy Klobuchar, however, knowing the name of the leader for a neighboring country is a task too far for a presidential candidate. We got to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, as the gentleman just said on the bump there. Okay, over in the case of Michael Flynn, his defense team is pressing for a dismissal of his case, arguing he should have been informed of events related to him described in the Justice Department watchdog findings on the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act abuses before he pled guilty. In other words, this information was withheld from him, and if he had known about the tampering or the lying to the FISA court, he probably would have pled not guilty and gone for the trial. So I think if we had an honest, honorable, justice is blind kind of a judge, yeah, they would dismiss the case. Maybe, hopefully, with prejudice, meaning they couldn't be retried here. Okay, all but two of the radical far-left Department of Justice attorneys who signed the petition for the fraudulent Mueller investigation also signed the petition calling on Attorney General William Barr to resign. And apparently Rudy Giuliani was on Lou Dobbs the other night on Fox Business Channel to discuss recent events involving the Democrats' actions to destroy the U.S. Constitution. And the first topic surrounded the list of former DOJ attorneys that have asked Barr to resign over the weekend. There must be a lot of people in Washington, D.C. who are afraid of new investigations, because it appears that everything they were accusing Donald Trump of doing, they themselves were doing. Psychiatrists call this projection, taking what you're doing and putting it on the other person. And probably one of the most common examples you'll see of that are in couples where one of them is carrying on an affair on the side, and the first thing they'll do is accuse the other partner of having an affair to put him on the defensive. That's exactly what was happening here. As we mentioned before, there's a media report by the Washington Post, was later confirmed supposedly by CNN, ABC News, and the Associated Press, stating that William Barr told associates he's considering resigning over President Trump's tweets and interference with the Department of Justice. A spokesperson is saying this is utter nonsense. Barr has no intentions of resigning. So like I said earlier in the show, the corporate media isn't reporting the news anymore. They're out there trying to manufacture it. Okay, Democratic Senator Chris Murphy basically had a meeting with Iranians last week in Germany, and Trump is now saying that's a violation of the Logan Act. And a lot of people are very, very concerned of that because of what was called the October surprise. And that was back when Jimmy Carter was running for his second term in office, and he lost out to Ronald Reagan because of that disaster in the desert when they tried to rescue the hostages that had been taken prisoner during Iran's basically telling the Americans to get out. And they took all these hostages and they were held for a very long time. Carter sent in a rescue mission which failed miserably. And apparently the story of the October surprise goes that representatives of the Reagan campaign, in particular George Bush, contacted the Iranians and said, if you will hang on to those prisoners, those hostages, until after the election, then we'll cut you some slack, we'll get you some weapons, we'll do nice things for you. That was a violation of the Logan Act, which makes it a criminal Act, negotiate with a foreign government outside the normal channels of communication like the White House and the State Department. So John Bolton is out there saying that he's worried about his upcoming memoir being censored by the White House. I don't think he's that worried about it. I think he's just trying to build buzz for the book. He's trying to go for the banned in Boston effect there. Oh my goodness, the White House is banning this book. I wonder what's in there. So he's just out there trying to make some money. I'm not planning on buying that book. And if somebody wants to give me a reason to buy the book, I'll reconsider that. But all of this talk about censorship and, you know, the White House is reviewing it and the NSA is reviewing it, it looks to me like it really is just a case of trying to build buzz, trying to get free publicity. Okay, President Trump is now threatening to sue the deep state operatives behind the fraudulent and criminal Mueller witch hunt. And I hope he does, and I hope he wins. And again, it's not because I'm a fan of President Trump, because I'm not really. He's been a terrible disappointment. But if we're going to restore the republic, the one thing we have to restore is the rule of law and a sense of ethics and morality within our culture, most especially within the government itself. And we don't have that right now. The image that is emerging of the federal government, it really is a swamp. And it's filled with vipers and water moccasins and crocodiles and alligators and Republicans and Democrats and independents. And it really is a very, very nasty place. That has to change. And again, another disappointment I have with Donald Trump is he said he was going to clean out the swamp. And the first thing he did upon going into the Oval Office is he kept all the Obama holdovers. And that, I think, was his biggest strategic mistake. Okay, we're coming up here on another commercial break here. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we will be right back. And aloha America, welcome back to the show here. And I'm getting a lot of emails from guitar enthusiasts reminding me it was Martin guitars, not Gibson, that got harassed by the government over exotic woods here. All right, so I stand corrected on that one here. Over at the Washington Post, they're taking criticism for an op-ed published yesterday by Marquette University political science professor Julia Azari, basically arguing that it's time to give the elites a bigger say in choosing the president. So what this professor, this political science professor, is saying is that the ultra-rich and the elites ought to have a much more significant role in picking the president. And she's citing the rocky start to the Democratic Party's presidential primary. Azari suggests the process of choosing the nominee be taken from the people and returned to the politicians. Well, I mean, we already have a situation where long before we get to go into a voting booth, the candidates are whittled down to those candidates who are favorable to the military-industrial complex, the pharmaceutical-industrial complex, the banking-industrial complex, and so forth and so on. We get to choose among which puppet for the rich and powerful we get to vote for. And it's always the lesser of two evils. We're trying to figure out which is still evil and a stupid way to be running the country. So I disagree, obviously, with this political science professor, because what Julia is suggesting here clearly goes against the intention of the founding fathers and the Constitution. Okay, there's another academic study out there that's encouraging the packing of the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, what they mean by packing, the Democrats, the liberal Democrats, are really concerned that the court is going to swing to the right, especially if President Trump wins re-election. And so now they're basically pushing the idea of packing the court, of simply adding more justices to the court bench who would presumably be liberal, to try and balance that out again. And what they're going to do is they're waiting until the Democrats occupy the White House again. And at that point, they'll start appointing liberal judges and say, well, 9 justices really aren't enough. Let's go to 15 or to 17 or to 19 justices, which I don't think they'll all fit on that bench that's at the front of the courtroom. So, hey, we'll have to build a whole new Supreme Court building there. All righty. Apparently, Clinton Stewart was released today from prison, and President Trump granted him clemency. Apparently, a federal judge asked Obama to grant Clinton clemency, but Obama refused. But the family and friends of Clinton Stewart were chanting Trump, Trump, Trump as he's released from prison in First Step Act. Okay. Feds have arrested state Democrat David Nangle in Massachusetts, who was actually sitting on the House Ethics Committee. He's accused of using campaign funds to pay his gambling debts. By the way, Trump was very clever in commuting Blagojevich's sentence, because it's brought before the public eye one more time just how corrupt Democrats can be. And I expect we'll probably see a few more of those in the coming year, where really corrupt Democrats who were sent to jail, I'm going to pardon you, or I'm going to commute your sentence. And the media will pick up on that. They'll fall for the bait, and they'll start talking about how corrupt all these Democrats were. So very, very clever, Trump's part for that one here. Okay, Judge Napolitano is out there on Tucker Carlson saying that the lead juror, the foreperson in the Roger Stone case, could be jailed for lying to the court. And the lie was simply that she came in saying she was unbiased. She didn't have any prior feelings about Roger Stone. And then we find out that she'd been on social media just bashing him continuously, clearly an anti-Trumper. And Napolitano went on to say the entire case in crooked Judge Amy Berman Jackson's court could be tossed out due to the open bias of the jury foreperson and other jurors as well. So Judge Kangaroo might be getting her comeuppance. Now, here's an interesting story. We've been talking about how California is talking about splitting into two states, North and South California. Well, apparently over in Oregon, conservatives who are tired of the state's constant liberal leadership, they want 22 rural counties to secede and become part of Idaho. And apparently Idaho is open to the idea, and they're signing a petition to basically put it on the next ballot. And if the motion passes, they're talking about redrawing the state lines. Idaho will become bigger and Oregon will get a lot smaller. So that will be interesting. Tumultuous events there. All right, let's turn to the international news here. Footage is finally being released of the Syrian army advances across Idlib and Aleppo. The ANA news agency released a 48-minute long video chronicling the entire Syrian Arab army operation to capture the last remaining jihadist-held sites along the Aleppo-Damascus highway, the M5. Assad is winning. The United States is losing, and I'm not the only one who's saying that, because there's an article here in Press TV, U.S. neocons and Zionist lobby losing the war in Syria. And this is according to Edward Corrigan, an international lawyer and political commentator. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump has called for an end to Russia's support for the Syrian government, engaged in efforts to liberate the whole country. Of course, Russia has already said, no, we're there for the long haul. We're going to participate in this war on terror, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more, until the terrorists are really gone, meaning the U.S.-backed jihadis. Now, you can absolutely guarantee that the U.S. will never admit that they've lost in Syria, because when you're engaged in a slow-motion world war, your first defeat ends the whole thing. The wheels come off the war wagon. And that's why we're still pouring money and people into places like Syria and Afghanistan and Iraq. So we don't have to say we lost. We can't say we won. The U.S. hasn't won a war in something like 45 years. But at least they'll be able to say, well, we haven't lost yet. We haven't lost yet. Just give us more of your money and more of your children. We shall prevail. We shall overcome. Blah, 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 blah. Notice that the children of members of Congress never see combat. If they go into the military service at all, it's always some rear echelon place where they're going to be safe. Getting on over to Israel, things are happening over there. Netanyahu is out there saying that he and the Trump administration are moving ahead with the deal of the century, and it doesn't matter whether the Palestinians agree to it or not. They're going to have to live with it. It's going to happen. He's basically talking about how the Palestinians will simply have to surrender. Apparently, Israel is torturing their Palestinian prisoners, and it's really, really serious. This is another article, I think, from this is from mintpressnews.com. One prisoner was hospitalized for kidney failure and 11 broken ribs. Another had his genitals bitten by a security dog, while a third man was left wheelchair-bound and unrecognizable. Meanwhile, the Israeli commander threatens to disable all youth in one of the refugee camps. All right, we're going to take a phone call now. Keith Rogers, aloha, Keith. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I just had a quick comment there. Business Insider has an article right now on this F-22 that came face-to-face with one of Russia's top fighters over there in Syria. And they're saying that the F-22 wouldn't have fared very well. But I had to reply to that. It says there was an error in their article, which I sent back to them, that someone forgot to mention that the U.S. and or the F-22 is illegally flying in Syria over a sovereign country.
Yes.
And on top of that, if my neighbor's son gets shot and killed holding up a liquor store, am I to feel sorry for him? This regime change wars, plural, has got to stop. If it isn't Trump saying that Nicaragua is a national security threat, the stuff with Venezuela, overthrowing democratically elected governments, that mean nothing to Americans. Seriously, if they have a socialist government, does it break yours in my day if they have something going on that we don't even are affected by, thousands of miles away? They don't have navies or anything like that to even attack America. They're of no risk. All you ever hear is that we're there to take the oil. Same thing with Bolton, with Venezuela. We know what's on the slate with Iran. It's been oil all along. The U.S. is the biggest oil broker with an army.
You're absolutely right. It's always been about the oil. Same thing with Afghanistan. There was that oil pipeline right away that they wanted to get, but they didn't want to have to pay for it. So they went on in to drive out the Taliban and install a puppet government headed by El Presidente de Uno Cal, Hamid Karzai.
I like how you put that. You know, what saddens me, Mike, and especially on my show, what I always highlight, is the loss of life. In 2019, 122 Air Force committed suicide. In 2018, 57 Marines, 22 Special Ops. From 2008 to present, over 60,000 veterans have committed suicide. And these are stats, and it's so bad that RAND has a study on it from 18 to 34-year-olds. And I tweeted this, and I made a few people mad there that things are getting so bad in the U.S. military that they're committing suicide just to get out. But it was there to shock people, that people don't realize that this government, through its neocons, are putting the lives of young American boys at risk to go over there who become disheartened because they realize they're not fighting for their democracy and freedom. They have a police state here at home.
You're absolutely right. They're finding out what the war is really all about. It's basically what Smedley Butler said in War is a Racket. And one of the movies that I wish would come back on TV so I can record it is Green Zone. But that came and went, and we don't seem to be seeing that one anymore.
Right. And, the listeners here should watch that video called Psychiatry in the Military, The Hidden Agenda, where it verifies and documents that 98% of all U.S. armed forces are on some type of a PTSD-type drug.
Yes. Or antidepressants.
This is the problem. Yeah. And this is because, like I say, when you go over and you watch what the military has been told to do in Fallujah, in Mosul, what they've done over in Raqqa, Syria, the bombing of innocent people and this allied terror bombing, which is just a spillover from the 67 cities in Japan, the 50 in Germany, the destruction of Europe, what they did to Iraq. These boys have a conscience, and they realize they're fighting the wrong enemy.
Yeah, it really is. But we had somebody on the show that was talking about all the medications that are being forced on these kids. And some of them, again, we know the problem with SSRIs. triggering suicides. And maybe that's a big part of what's going on here. But right now, the Pentagon is spending more on these medications than they do on Black Hawk helicopters.
Yeah, and then also they just came out here with that article about how the STIs, basically sexually transmitted diseases and stuff, has a massive rise there because these kids, you know, they're all sexually frustrated. They're put into positions where they can't do anything, you know, and they're seeking relief through dating apps and stuff. I mean, you've totally demoralized your own military.
Well, that's definitely a bad thing that you want to do. If you go back to The Art of War by Sun Tzu, where he says that in order to win a war, your military must believe in the moral rightness of the war so that they will fight and, if necessary, die to prevail. And you must have a civilian population that believes in the moral rightness of the war so that they will bear the hardships that war brings, even to the victorious side. And the U.S. government has neither of those. The military knows what's really going on. More and more American citizens are figuring out what's really going on. It's all about the money. It's about the oil. It's about forcing the rest of the world to go back to a system that favored the United States of America economically.
Right. And your caller earlier, I sent you an email on that. This economy stuff, a lot of people want to blame this on the Democrats, but this has been going a long time because it all deals with the banking situation. Trump and his so-called reform or increase in the economy, it means nothing because of the amount of dollars they continue to print. So there's no gain whatsoever. Nothing has been spent down on the national debt or anything like that. It just keeps growing and growing and growing. So, yeah, we just have to wait for the collapse.
Yeah, we are. And I think, you know, while I said before prognostication is difficult, to me it feels like it's starting to tear itself apart. Certainly if you look at what's going on over in the Democratic Party right now with the factionalism, we're seeing the Democratic Party literally start to split in two over the issue of Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, I compare it to an LA freeway chase there where eventually the stop sticks come out, the tires go down, the sparks start flying, and then it ends in a crash, and then you have the freeze MF on the other, the total end of it, when someone finally says stop. Anyway, thanks, Mike, okay?
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. I'm still getting emails from guitar enthusiasts, and again, to sort of sort out this mess here, Gibson guitars were the ones who were raided. And apparently Martin guitar was the one who was using the same exotic woods and was basically left alone. So I'm putting up a story that's about that right now that will appear as soon as the cache flips over on the What Really Happened website. Okay, getting on back to Israel here. Netanyahu is optimistic about sabotaging the ICC probe into alleged Israeli war crimes in the Palestinian territories. And he's confident he can block the International Criminal Court from launching the investigation. And while Israel is not a signatory to the ICC, it has sought to undermine the efforts of the international body by lobbying governments friendly to Israel to support its campaign to disrupt the court's investigation. Chief among them, of course, is the United States itself. I mean, after all, they're just Palestinians. I mean, you know, who really cares about that here? Meanwhile, Netanyahu's trial for corruption is to begin on March 17th, this according to the Israeli Justice Ministry. And this will be just 2 weeks after Israel holds its third national election in less than a year. Now, Netanyahu is the first sitting Israeli prime minister to be charged with a crime. He's denied any wrongdoing in the 3 corruption cases against him. In addition to his legal battle, Netanyahu, who heads the right-wing Likud party, is fighting for his political life in the March 2nd election after inconclusive ballots in April and September. Well, I think you've had that job long enough there, Mr. Netanyahu. All right, we're going to take a break here for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I just put up that article regarding this whole thing with Gibson guitars. And apparently, the reason Gibson got raided on numerous occasions, by the way, it turned out the ebony fingerboards were seized with the claim that they violated Madagascar law. Gibson responded by obtaining the sworn word of the Madagascar government that no law had been broken. In another raid, the feds found materials imported from India, claiming they too moved across the globe in violation of Indian law. Gibson's response was that the feds had simply misinterpreted the law. And of course, C.F. Martin and Company, several of their guitars contained East Indian rosewood, which is the exact same wood in at least 10 of Gibson's guitars, but they were not rated, and their inventory of foreign wood was not seized. Now, what it turns out is Gibson's chief executive, Henry Juskowitz, contributed to Republican politicians, including $2,000 to Representative Marsha Blackburn and $1,500 to Senator Lamar Alexander. Chris Martin IV, the Martin and Company CEO, is a longtime Democratic supporter with $35,400 in contributions to Democratic candidates and the Democratic National Committee over the past couple of election cycles. So Gibson was inappropriately targeted. It's a shakedown. Donate to us or bad things will happen to you. It's a nice guitar company you got over there. Be a shame if something bad happened to it, right? You need protection. You need protection. That's what's going on here. All righty, getting on back to Israel here. The Israeli parliament has granted immunity to former Labor, Social Affairs, and Social Services Minister Haim Katz, who is facing his own trial over corruption charges. Now, the members of the Knesset voted by 62 to 43 in favor of Katz's immunity request, claiming that he carried out the misconduct in good faith as part of his work as a member of the Knesset. Now, I'm wondering if this is a trial balloon to see how much of a negative reaction this immunity deal is going to get. And if it doesn't get a negative reaction, look for them to do exactly the same thing for Benjamin Netanyahu. That's what I think is going on. Over in Yemen, there's been an attempted assassination attempt against the defense minister. His car tripped a landmine. He survived, but apparently a number of members of his personal security team died or sustained injuries in the explosion. So this is all the stuff that's going on in the Middle East that the corporate media doesn't want you thinking about here. All righty. A lot of people are looking at the U.S. escalation of nuclear weapons and realizing that it's going to have an impact on Europe's nuclear weapons and European politics. One major U.S. consideration is the Trump administration's decisions on nuclear strategy, which will have an enormous impact that will be likely to shape international relations indefinitely. So it's like all the positive progress that was made toward world peace over the last couple of decades, it's all being thrown away. We're back to a new Cold War version 2.0, the golden cut. We have to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. So let's talk about COVID-19. And the first group of coronavirus evacuees leaves quarantine at San Diego Marine Base. They got this procession of white tour buses, began rolling out, helping families and individuals quite literally get on with their lives after 14 days spent under constant monitoring by a group of public health workers keen on spotting every sneeze, sniffle, or cough. None had any symptoms. They're all testing clean. They're all being let go. Well, that's the good news. The bad news is earlier today on the Fox News channel, they had a representative from the CDC who had two important pieces of news. The first is they're now realizing that the incubation period for this virus could be considerably longer than 2 weeks. This guy was saying it could be 3 weeks, could be 4 weeks. They don't really know. They don't have this basic information about the incubation period of this particular pathogen. The second bit of news that he had that's very, very troubling is he's saying only 30 to 50% of the testing kits for COVID-19 are actually working because apparently a lot of them were packed with outdated reagents just because they have a shortage of the necessary chemicals to do this. So that's a little bit unnerving. Now, South Korea is saying that they're successfully treating COVID-19 patients with natural oxygen therapy. And they're saying this is a breakthrough. And then apparently they've treated a patient using all natural oxygen therapy. And unlike our own Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which only advocates for pharmaceuticals and vaccines, Korea's equivalent of the CDC effectively cured, dare we use that word, a patient by delivering pure oxygen through a face mask, according to the local news service Census. Now, Japan has started releasing passengers from the Diamond Princess, and they're beginning the process of offloading the remaining 2,000 plus passengers. Boy, that's a big ship. and crew aboard the Diamond Princess. They've been under quarantine for 14 days. And again, nobody tested positive. This, except for the ones that were on the planes there. Anyway, the first 500 people left earlier today. There's no preference given to different nationalities. I guess they're doing it alphabetically. Now, many who depart will be subject to another 14 days of quarantine, including any Americans who elected to stay on the ship instead of traveling back to the U.S. on the evac flight. Roughly 40 Americans were also excluded from that flight because they were being treated for the virus in a Japanese hospital. So, oh boy. Okay. Russia has now barred all Chinese from entering. New Zealand has stopped all post and shipping from China. And the Apple virus shock is set to hit semiconductor suppliers. So people are taking this very, very seriously. Regardless of how serious the virus itself is, the economic damage, the damage to our supply chains is definitely there. Okay, there's been another study. I mean, everybody's trying to research this virus, and they found that COVID-19 binds to human cells 20 times more than SARS, and that sneezes containing the virus can travel up to 200 feet. Because when you sneeze, you're not just blowing out virus particles, you're blowing out tiny, tiny droplets of phlegm in which the virus can survive because it's walled off from the air and the phlegm blocks ultraviolet light. A lot of people didn't know that. Now, Florida is concealing the number of people tested for COVID-19 and basically said, we can't tell you because of privacy concerns. Now, that absolutely is not accurate because publishing aggregate numbers without any personally identifiable information doesn't violate any privacy law or regulation related to the privacy. In fact, as the Tampa Bay Times reports, senators pressed Rivkees, calling that during the mosquito-borne Zika infection outbreak in 2015 and 2016, the state frequently published the number of specimens that were being tested. 26 people have been quarantined in New York after returning from COVID-19 outbreak areas. They're being voluntarily quarantined, mostly in their homes, have not shown any symptoms of the illness. According to County Health Chief Dr. Shirlita Obler, these people are not ill, but we still have to monitor them. Well, I don't know. For something that some people say is a biological weapon, it's really not all that effective, is it? Except apparently, if we're to believe recent reports, it's really only lethal to ethnic East Asians. Now, ethnically sensitive pathogens for humans do not exist in nature. So I would say this was a failed biological weapon, or they were trying to weaponize COVID-19 and it escaped from the lab here. There is now a shortage of surgical masks because Taiwan has cut off exporting the masks they manufacture. Thailand has now imposed limits on exports of the masks they manufacture. So if you're planning on getting a mask just in case, you'd better get them now. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And getting on back to the news here. YouTube is now demonetizing all videos about COVID-19. And I think they're doing it because a lot of people are putting out sensational videos, basically for the money. Oh, it's going to be horrible. It's going to kill everybody. And YouTube is now demonetizing those videos. Meanwhile, U.S. Senator Tom Cotton is still out there questioning the official story put out by the Chinese government and parroted by mainstream media that this illness originated in a fish market that just happens to be located quite close to the Wuhan BSL-4 laboratory. And as we reported, I think it was only yesterday, there's a story out there that they were working with bats that were infected with COVID-19, and there was an incident where a researcher was exposed to the blood of one of the bats, and he self-quarantined for 14 days, and then he got on out. But again, if the incubation period is actually a lot longer,
First of all, that's going to be a major problem for the epidemiologist trying to track down close contacts. It's one thing if you have a pathogen with an incubation period of 3 or 4 days. You remember who you were talking to 3 or 4 days ago, but do you remember who you were talking to last month? Problem. Now, the World Health Organization has announced today it had no indications the new COVID-19 had spread to North Korea after South Korean media suggested there were cases and deaths that were being covered up by the Pyongyang authorities. Well, see, there is an advantage to having a closed border, isn't there? Financial markets are banking on the economy recovering quickly and completely as soon as COVID-19 peaks like SARS or Ebola. But the models aren't accounting for some key info they don't have. And it's likely China's economy will not recover 100% when the pandemic is over. Okay. All right, let's talk about some of the economic news. Basically, Bonner is out there saying that the Federal Reserve sinks into funny money normalcy. In other words, we were talking earlier in the show about how the Federal Reserve is just printing up money like crazy or typing money into the computers. And apparently, it's spinning out of control here. But apparently, the Federal Reserve's idea is this is the new normal. This is the new normal. We're going to create money and pour it into the system to try and keep the stock market propped up and try and keep the banks going here. The problem is the phony boom depends on more and more phony money. Take the money away and the whole thing implodes. That's just the reality of what's going on here. If that funny money creation stops, the whole system comes crashing down. So that's one answer to the question one of the callers had about when is it going to happen? So anyway, the funny money enters the financial system as debt. It is lent out, increasing the amount of liquidity, but it's also increasing the amount of debt. That's the problem. If they were to print up the money and basically hand it out for free, it would actually be healthier for the economy than the system they're doing now. But the markets are taking COVID-19 in relative stride because if things get markedly worse, we're going to have more quantitative easing before you can blink. This is coming from Jefferies. All righty. The Baltic Dry Index is now trading below 450. And if you look at the chart for the Baltic Dry Index, it's just plummeting right now. And that's because people are staying in their homes. They're not buying things. In some sections of China, people are not even allowed to leave their homes to go buy food. And again, were the worst case scenario play out, COVID-19 takes hold here in the United States of America and we're subject to similar quarantines, that's a good reason to have storable food and water in your home. Stick it in your garage or something like that. So, now there's an article, this one came out of Zero Hedge, Financial Feudalism, the New American Dream, and it's talking about all these new websites that are popping up to hook young college women with sugar daddies who will pay for their college education and their room and board in exchange for a regular commitment of hot sex. And it's basically saying rising college fees and rent and the lack of time available for work during studies, many women are extremely vulnerable to exploitation. Well, some are, but the problem is the money makes it look very, very attractive. And when I was in college, I actually knew a young lady who was paying for her college education in the world's oldest profession. And it wasn't that she was forced to, it's just it took less time and she made a lot more money. And ultimately, she wound up owning a small strip mall. So she actually did very well for herself. She invested her money wisely and, did very well. She also won the Gong Show at one point. And anyway. All right, Macy's has been downgraded to junk. Their stock took a major, major hit. And apparently French car giant Renault is also cut to junk. And Moody's downgraded the automaker from Baa3 to Ba1, the highest junk rating after the company posted its first annual loss in a decade. People can't buy stuff. They don't have the money. And poor, poor Boeing, they cannot seem to cut a break. apparently during maintenance in several undelivered 737 MAXs, they found debris in the fuel tanks. It's called foreign object debris. Now, obviously, if you have small metal particles floating around the fuel tank, it can, if it's smaller than the fuel lines, which are somewhat sizable, given the volume of fuel that these jet engines suck in, they could get sucked into the engine and cause damage. They could block fuel jets. They could cause all kinds of problems. So they're basically mounting a new program of internal investigation to find out how the debris got there and to basically, try and clean it all out here. But mainly, we've got 40 countries have now banned the 737 MAX from operating in their airspace. Australia, China, Thailand, Malaysia, India, Oman, the European Union, Singapore, Canada, and others as well. What a shame. Boeing used to be one of the premier aircraft makers. Not anymore. They've lost that crown to Airbus. I think I mentioned this earlier in the program. Or no, actually, I was interviewed on another show earlier this morning, and I mentioned it there. Jaguar Land Rover's British factory is about ready to run out of Chinese parts in just a matter of few weeks. And the amount of supply chain disruptions that are coming out of the woodwork is nothing short of astonishing. This is the downside of globalism. We've become dependent on China for components, not just for cars, but for electronics, computers, and it's all slowing down. Now, China is out there insisting that more than 90% of the state-owned enterprises are back in business and producing what they need to produce, but the privately owned companies, many of those are still shut down. So Jaguar said yesterday they have enough Chinese parts for the next 2 weeks, but heading into March, their production lines could grind to a halt. All right, Warren is selling Apple. That's a bad sign. Of course, they're in trouble with supply chains too. Walmart just posted its biggest earnings miss since August of 2015, and it's looking more and more like recession is here. All righty, over at, let's see, goldcore.com, they have an article. Once again, reiterating, silver bullion is set to outperform gold and other precious metals and the vastly overvalued risk assets of stocks and bonds in the coming years. They're basically saying the record nominal high of $50 an ounce in 1980 and 2012 will almost certainly be seen in the next 2 years. And again, if you've got to make precious metals part of your investment portfolio. They hold onto their value. You've never seen silver or gold or rhodium or tantalum or platinum crash down to zero value. It just does not happen. Their price may fluctuate. Actually, what's fluctuating is the price of the currency with which you're buying and selling the gold or platinum or silver. And gold is sort of assumed to be near its peak, whereas silver's got a lot of room to grow. And one of the best ways that you can get into silver investment is through what is called junk silver. And you can find this on eBay, and it's just basically a bag of the pre-1964 US coinage where the quarters are made out of silver, and they're worth about $1.50 each for the melt value. The dimes are made out of silver, the nickel's made out of nickel, the pennies are still copper, and it's a good way to get in. Plus, if the economy goes kablooey, those known coins of known value will be much easier to barter than trying to scrape off, bits of gold and silver from bars. So it's a good way to go. Definitely a good way to go. All right, the other day we had somebody who called on in talking about the censorship question on the upcoming census, and apparently the censorship question will not be on the 2020 census, but the Census Bureau is still having to spend millions on ads combating the scare. Those poor illegal immigrants, they're scared there's going to be a citizenship question. Oh my goodness, we have to take care of them and calm them down. Those poor illegal immigrants here. They shouldn't even be counted on the census. The census is supposed to be counting U.S. citizens to draw the congressional districts. That's its constitutional purpose. They shouldn't be counted when apportioning districts to the House of Representatives. So the Census Bureau is investing millions of dollars in an ad campaign underlining the fact that the information collected on the census will not be shared with federal or local authorities. Leave that one, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All right, let's talk a little bit about computers and such. I think the technology in a lot of our products is becoming decadent, and we really don't need it. And there was an incident involving Guardian journalist Carrie Paul. Paul had rented a car through a local car sharing service called Gig Car Share, which offers a fleet of hybrid Toyota Priuses and electric Chevrolet Bolt EVs in the Bay Area and Sacramento, and planned to spend the weekend in a more rural part of the state about 3 hours north of Oakland. But on Sunday, she was left stranded on an unpaved road when the car's telematics system lost its cell signal. The car could not call home. The rented Prius refused to move. Now, that is just poor planning. That is just poor planning. There should be an override somewhere on those cars to say, I can't get a cell signal, please turn my car back on. I have the key, I have the fob, I am who I say I am. But why do we have to have cars that call home to be authorized to operate? What if there'd been a medical emergency? What if she'd had a passenger who was having a heart attack or a stroke or delivering a baby? People don't think these things through all the way. They really don't. Okay. A still unnamed US-based natural gas facility had to shut down operations for 2 days after being hit with a ransomware infection that prevented personnel from receiving crucial real-time operational data from control and communication equipment. This is coming from the Department of Homeland Security. So the yesterday's advisory from the Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, didn't identify the site except to say it was a natural gas compression facility. Okay, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And again, a reminder that Republic Broadcasting is holding a fundraising drive right now. And folks, we really, really need it. All joking aside about mutant hamsters and having to sell our control room technicians for medical experiments, we're really in a serious situation here. We need your help. The postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 3. The network thanks you. Okay, as you know, Brexit is going through. There's a transition period which will end in December, and already everybody's talking about the complexities of the trade deals here. And apparently there is a bit of a disagreement coming over regarding various processed meat products, in particular sausages, such as the one used to make the British banger sandwich. And farmers are saying they will have no legal basis to slip their sausages into European markets after the end of the transition period in December. Now, at the moment, the European Union has no health certificate for goods such as fresh sausages or mince, as it has never imported the goods from third countries. Well, Britain is now printed lips, no longer a part of the European Union. And so Boris Johnson should be prepared to start lobbying for Frankfurters in Frankfurt. All right, the illegal alien acquitted in Kate Steinle's murder is deemed mentally ill and unfit to stand trial for a gun charge. This guy is a 7-time felon, 5 times deported illegal alien. He was acquitted for 32-year-old Kate Steinle's murder in 2017. He will not stand trial on federal gun charges after a California court has deemed him mentally ill. The illegal immigrants are getting better treatment from the U.S. government than the legal citizens. Have you noticed that? I'm absolutely appalled. 7-time felon. I mean, if he's mentally ill, there's a reason right there to fling him back over the border. We don't need any more crazy people in this country. We have enough of them in the halls of Congress. Okay. As you're probably already aware, along with here in the United States, there's major flooding down along the Pearl River. And we're actually looking at possible flooding on the Ohio River. And over in Great Britain, they've got the floods swamping part of Britain, and they're blaming it on climate change. The climate change ate our homework. And Dillingpole is out there saying, no, it's got nothing to do with climate change. It's the usual villains, government inaction in the face of maintaining flood control systems. But hey, we'll just, the government will absolve itself of responsibility by pinning the blame on climate change. Oh, say, the climate change did this. Well, okay, if you believe the climate is changing and it's going to lead to flooding, why did you not proactively prepare for it? That's where their whole argument kind of falls apart. All righty. This should have been up in the computer section, but apparently the government of Puerto Rico, which is suffering through their own debt crisis and strapped for cash after enduring 2 major natural disasters, reportedly lost more than $2 million in an email phishing scam directed at one of its finance directors, according to Associated Press. Apparently, they've lost more than $4 million total to email phishing scams. And nothing gets done here. Okay, a Major League Baseball star, Audrey Huff, was barred from the upcoming 2010 World Series Championship reunion over his past tweets, which included a photo of Huff at a gun range with his sons and a tweet joking about Iranian women. Oh, you're not politically correct. You can't come to the reunion. Well, to the dark regions with political correctness, that's my idea. Or that's my position on that here. Doctors working on a clinical trial for treatment of heart disease held back key data. This is from Newsnight. The Excel trial tested whether stents were as effective as open heart surgery at treating patients with a heart problem called left main disease, and the data that was held back suggested that people fitted with the stents were dying after only 3 years. It's not even enough time to finish paying for that. Okay, hackers have succeeded in tricking a Tesla, actually 2 types of Tesla cars, into speeding up by 50 miles per hour using 2 inches of tape. What they did is they went on out to speed signs that said the speed limit is 35, and by putting this 2 inches of tape in front of the 3, they convinced the Teslas that it said the speed limit was 85. They did it to prove that autonomous driving systems and the machine learning algorithms that power them still have a long way to go. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, Ring and Nest are normalizing American surveillance and turning us into a nation of voyeurs. And it's basically talking about how these devices are empowering Americans to spy on their neighbors, to spy on their own family members. And this is the new normal here. So, according to the Washington Post, Amazon's Ring and Google's Nest and other internet-connected cameras, some selling for as little as $59, have given Americans the tools they need to become a personal security force, and millions of people now seeing what's happening around their home every second, what Ring calls the new neighborhood watch. Well, that's obviously a puff piece to promote these devices, say, oh, you should get one. But the article goes on to talk about an example of why this may not be a good thing. And it seems to involve a young girl who was sitting on the front porch of her home talking about things she didn't like about her parents and things that she was doing her parents wouldn't like, not realizing that mommy was keeping an eye on her through the little Ring camera system, which has a microphone as well as the camera. So, you're going to have this kind of behavior from adolescents anyway. I got to be very honest. I mean, people like privacy, especially young kids, and you could actually demoralize them. If anything, it's going to make the kid a little more rebellious to know that they're being spied on all the time. You could kill their spirit that way. I mean, if I were fortunate enough to have had children, which is probably the biggest single disappointment in my life, I wouldn't spy on them. I would work to build a, mutual trust and a good relationship and say, if you've got a problem, come talk to me. Just keep that communication going. And I'm not going to spy on you, and I'm not going to read your diary, and I'm not going to, pry open your door and go through your bureau, looking for contraband, unless I got a really, really good reason to think something's going on. But just spying for the sake of spying, no. I think that's got to be bad for people, not just kids. Okay, over in New York City, taxpayers are on the hook for a multi-million-dollar cyber center in the heart of Manhattan with deep ties to Israel's high-tech intelligence apparatus. Now, this has been a going concern where all of these systems, NSA, CIA, whatever, they're connected to Israel's high-tech intelligence systems, and they're getting the feed without any filtering whatsoever, which means they're getting personal communications of members of Congress. It's one thing for our government to be spying on the American people like that. It's quite another for the government of a foreign nation to be getting that information. I see that as a major, major problem, and another indicator that the U.S. government really is a poodle for Israel. Doesn't seem to be anybody left in Washington, D.C. with the courage to stand up to Israel. Okay, George Soros is out there saying that the Facebook CEO and COO should be removed and accuses Zuckerberg of conspiring with Trump. And he slammed Mark Zuckerberg, accusing him of helping to get U.S. President Donald Trump reelected. Now, this made a comment, Soros' comments came after Zuckerberg said during the Munich Security Conference that he expects more government regulation to come from the states on basically taking political advertising as an example, what discourse should be allowed. And Soros is claiming that Zuckerberg appears to be engaged in some kind of mutual assistance arrangement with Donald Trump that will help him to get reelected. Well, that all depends on which part of the government is setting the limits on discourse, which there shouldn't really be anybody setting limits on discourse because of that First Amendment. But don't forget, not too long ago, Zuckerberg was out there saying, maybe Facebook went overboard in the censorship and they were going to pull back and confine themselves to censoring articles that talked about child abuse or promoting terrorism, and everything else was going to be, and I can see why Soros would not like that at all. Because we talk a lot about George Soros and we talk a lot about his corrupting influence on American politics. So anyway, Twitter has now locked WikiLeaks' official account with 5.4 million followers days before Julian Assange's extradition hearing. So the censorship does continue. All righty, the phone lines are open. And we have 800-313-9443. Okay. Bernie Sanders is out there talking about open borders, which would make everyone in America poorer. And basically the idea is to open the borders and bring in a lot of low-wage workers, which would drag down the wages and salaries of legal American citizens. And again, it's a very short-sighted approach. Now, the liberals want more illegal immigrants to come on in. They want them to be able to vote because that will lock them into power for the foreseeable future. The problem is that when you have prices going up and rents going up and you're driving down the wages and salaries of Americans, sooner or later there's going to be a crossover point where the whole system starts to come apart. And we're seeing it. Look what happened to Macy's today, downgraded to junk status. Macy's has been an iconic American retailer for the longest time. I remember as a kid watching the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade and all the floats and the bands and last January it was basically some kid with a kazoo and a helium balloon. So they're running out of money for all this stuff. Apparently, the U.S.-China trade deal has been delayed because of fears of a global recession. And again, the downside of globalism, what happens to one country affects every other country as well. Donald Trump is once again saying he knows who the author of the anonymous New York Times op-ed is, and he knows who the leakers are at the White House. Well, Donald, do something about it. Do something about it, okay? So, there's a civil war going on over in the Department of Justice aiming to remove Attorney General Barr and to weaken Trump. Like I said earlier, the government is tearing itself apart already between the good people and the bad people. Certainly hope the good people win, but it's going to get torn apart. It really is. Okay, remember we were talking earlier about the so-called Bernie brothers? These are the ones, that's the name given to these disruptors who show up and claim to support Bernie Sanders, and they'll commit acts of violence. I don't think they're part of Bernie Sanders' campaign. I think it's a put-up job. It's a Nixonian dirty trick to make Bernie Sanders look bad. Oh, he promotes violence. Look at the Bernie brothers here. But apparently Meghan McCain made a comment to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez saying the Bernie brothers are deeply misogynistic, sexist, violent, and made my mom cry. And obviously the Bernie brothers are looking bad, and by extension, they're trying to make Bernie Sanders look bad. All righty. A little bit of science news here. Astronomers have detected molecular oxygen in another galaxy for the first time. That's pretty significant. It's amazing. I mean, when I was working for NASA JPL, I spent a summer as the assistant at the Table Mountain Observatory, and that was fairly cutting edge stuff there. And I've been to Palomar, and I did a little work at Mount Wilson and everything. But just seeing what they're doing today, I'm feeling very techno-gapped and also a little jealous. I mean, when we lived in Hawaii, we went down to the Big Island. We toured the observatories up on Mauna Kea. Got to see the Keck telescopes. That's really, really amazing stuff that's being done here. All right. Strange neuron-like bursts have been detected in skin cells for the first time. Well, there are neurons in the skin cells because that's how you feel pain or temperature changes. So I'm not exactly sure what they're saying with this one here. All righty. More disagreement, if you will, on COVID-19. They say there's 73,000 confirmed infections, but another estimate puts it closer to 1 million at 983,000. Another little question out there. Who controls the rules for human gene editing? And that's a very, very good question. Because especially with CRISPR, they're starting to tinker around with human genes. There was that report about these twins who were born with edited genes that was supposed to make them immune to certain diseases. We haven't heard much about that since then. We already talked about the issues with the CDC test for COVID-19. And like I said, the guy was on Fox News earlier saying that a lot of the kits were set out with expired, out-of-date reagents. So they're not going to work here. God, that's really scary how unprepared they seem to have been for this one. Alrighty, Pelosi is heading to the European Union to protect them from Huawei. And there's no protection involved here. Well, in a way there is. Do business with us or bad things will happen to you. But as I mentioned earlier, Huawei has cut the price of their chipsets by 30%. And the American manufacturers, they can't match that. They can't match that price point. It's an economic war. It really, really is. So there's been another ugly incident involving the police where a cop executed an unarmed grandfather just for walking toward the officer. That was it. He's walking to the officer and the cop pulls the gun and just shoots him here. Now, China, getting on back to China and the economy, they could grant tariff exemptions on U.S. oil and liquefied natural gas. So China's beginning to buckle on some aspects of the trade war. But as I reported a little earlier in the show here, a new trade deal is being delayed out of concerns of a global recession. All righty. This is an interesting one. China's drinkers get happy hour margaritas delivered to their door so they don't have to leave their home and risk being infected with the COVID-19. Well, what about the delivery person? What if the delivery person has the illness and they're not symptomatic, but they are contagious? You could have all the drinkers in China, get infected, in an entire neighborhood get infected that way here. Many people seem shocked the market is so strong despite COVID-19. Well, the market's being propped up by the Federal Reserve. So it's going to be relatively immune to the things that would drive normal investors to say, I want my money now. And as I mentioned before, normal, ordinary investors like you and I, we're being shut out of the stock market. It's becoming exclusively a rich person's playground. And yes, it's being rigged to make them richer at our expense. I got some calls. Okay. Whoa, I do have some calls here. Jeff in Michigan, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, I'm concerned about the criminal illegal aliens crossing our border, committing crimes like murder, rape, and as such, and the fact that they deport them. I'm kind of curious as to why we don't try them, convict them, execute them, load their bodies on a catapult and heave their body back over the border. Why are we not doing this? This is an act of war against our country.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I mean, all of these sanctuary cities and all of this supporting and taking care of the illegal immigrants, it's a violation of Title VIII. But there's obviously a huge political push from the liberals to get these people in, treat them as if they're citizens, get them to vote. And they're trying to change the voting demographic. They're especially targeting Texas, because if Texas swings from red to blue before the November election, Trump will lose his job.
Yeah, so what we need to do is to get the elected officials, march them into a concentration camp and re-educate them as to what it is to be an American and protect our own country against invasion.
Well, who do you mean by we? Because, law enforcement and prosecution is under the control of the government. If you're advocating...
Well, here's what I would do. I would offer, for the price of $1, a hunting license for people crossing the border illegally. And it would end very soon. And I feel sorry for those poor people in Mexico that can't get a job making a living wage. But the people that are doing that to them are the 1%ers, the power elite, whatever you want to call them, of Wall Street. Those are the ones that are doing it to them, not the American people. And God help them. But I mean, what do you figure? What do you figure the American people are supposed to do? Just starve and die while these people come into our country and take everything we have?
Well, that's certainly the attitude of the liberals. The attitude of the liberals are that the illegal immigrants are more useful to them than ordinary American citizens who more and more are voting conservative.
So what are we waiting for? Time to put them in a re-education camp and beat them in the fucking head until they can figure it out.
Well, we'll take it under advisement.
Oh, yeah. That's easy, ain't it, huh? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. We're going to switch over to Tom in Florida. Tom, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Tom, are you there?
The last call is not right, Michael. Good day to you. It's like a bunch of locusts. This is like a locust plague. Can you hear me, Michael?
Yes, I can hear you. You're on the air.
Yeah, it's like locusts. It's an invasion of what's going on in Africa and China with the locusts. These people, they're devouring everything. Pretty soon there'll be nothing left for nobody. But the reason I called your show, Michael, is first off, it's going to be really interesting tonight when you got Trump, what is the rally in Arizona, and then going to have Bloomberg on stage with Bernie. That should be really good entertainment tonight. And by the way, the documentary on Washington ended last night, but it was really good. The ending was excellent. Washington, like I said, was a great man. There's no question about it. So that really, I hope you get the chance, Michael, to see that documentary. But
I'm sure
here's
they'll
the main
rerun it.
Yeah, they will. Here's the main reason I called you, Michael, so everybody in your listening audience understands real quickly. The Miami Herald reported today.
Tom, stay on the line. We got to take a break for our last commercial break. We're going to come right back to you after these words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of the program today. And Tom in Florida, if you could finish up, I've got one more call I'm going to try and fit in before the end of the show.
Yeah, Michael, just to say that your last caller is absolutely correct. This is like a locust swarm. These people are coming to devour. They're going to devour everything. And what's going on in Africa and China, these locusts are eating 40 acres an hour. And it's like they just totally devour everything. Pretty soon there'll be nothing left for none of us. And it's like if you have 20 men on a boat that can only carry 5 people, you're going to sink the boat. But, yeah, Michael, the Miami Herald on the news today, they're talking about what's going on in South Florida here with the kidnappings with Haitians. On Haiti, they're having a major kidnapping ring going on. Check it out on Breitbart or whatever. And they're doing it here in South Florida. And by the way, Michael, there's so much going on here in South Florida. It's mind-blowing to the people that listen to your show if they hear what's going on. In the county government, solid waste, water, sewer, transit, all these federal government jobs, 40% of them are going to people not even been in the country 3 to 4 years. In South Florida here, Michael.
Yeah, it is. All right, well, thank you. We're going to let you go.
That's how they're taking over the government. They're getting these federal government jobs, Michael. Crazy.
Okay, Tom.
Americans should be doing those jobs.
Tom, we got to let you go here because I want to try and fit in Mark from Georgia. Mark from Georgia, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, again, I hear you use the word liberal, and I'm a classical liberal, so I want to clarify. The Hegelian left wants the voters for their political power, but the Hegelian right is the ones who want the cheap labor. So both sides are basically partners in crime, and I'm with Brewster's Billions. None of the above is the Hegelian excluded. It excludes what actually is. It excludes what ought rightly be, so that they can pretend that doing more of what got us into this mess is going to get us out of it. And I do wish that gentleman would, instead of acknowledging that, one, we need to stop giving welfare state benefits to these uninvited guests, and it is part of the plutocratic agenda. And I say to our Latino American listeners in their language, aquellos cual han violado Latino America están haciendo la misma cosa aquí. Entonces, donde los van a correr? In English, those who rape Latin America are doing the same thing here. Then where are you going to run? I'd rather they take back their own homeland, and I wish there was something we could do to help. I think that all countries we need to have a militia, informed, organized, trained, disciplined, and equipped to take back our country through all peaceable means. And, of course, I'm not advocating violence. I'm advocating that the lawful use of force is not to be confused with violence. But if it comes to violence, it's because the criminal elements of our current system refuse to admit that they've lied to us, that they've betrayed us. And I'd rather they come clean and own up to what they've done. And I was involved with the Restore America plan, and it was co-opted. And I'd love to see the reinstatement of the rule of law, otherwise known as the republic. And the first thing is that republic means the rule of law, and this ain't it. We're on the same page there?
Yes, we're on the same page there. And Mark, I'm going to have to let you go because we're out of time. We're out of time. Thank you very much here. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please spread the word of RBN and whatreallyhappened.com. Please donate to RBN. It is really a dire situation there. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.